So one of the greatest things about living for 4.5 years in California was our family trips to the national parks. We love the national parks as a family. It got us out of the city, helped us to slow down, encouraged us to reconnect with one another and with all of the amazing creation that those magnificent parks have to offer. And two of my favorite memories of those trips involve darkness. You see, I am not afraid of the dark. I love the darkness. I tend to have a spirituality that centers itself around the moon. And the moon requires darkness. More on that in a minute. One year, several years ago, we spent the weekend before Thanksgiving in Sequoia National Park in Central California. Now, Sequoia is arguably our collective favorite of the national parks in California. And at this time of the year, it can get pretty cold and it can snow. And the kids really wanted to tour the Crystal Cave. But we couldn't get a ticket to tour the Crystal Cave until literally the day of. Because at that time of the year, the Crystal Cave can close at a moment's notice for the season. And so we had to wait. And we discovered the morning that we bought our tickets that the electricity had already been turned off to the Crystal Cave. And so yes, we could take the tour, but it would be much darker than usual because you could only go on the tour by flashlight only. So off we went with our mag light and our extra batteries. And about halfway through the tour, our guide, or the cave scientist, as Audrey called her, had us all sit down. Carefully, of course, because there are things that far back in a cave you really shouldn't touch or disturb. And when everybody was situated, and Jacob was safely on my lap, and Audrey was safely on her daddy's, the guide had everyone turn the lights off. And if you have ever been in such a moment, you know that that is the darkest dark that humans can experience. It's dark. And it's so quiet. It was one of the most sacred moments I have ever experienced. Yesterday, we were talking about that memory, and Audrey said it was peaceful in the darkness. I was scared at first, but after a few minutes, it wasn't so scary anymore. And as we sat in that cave on that cold, dark day, I thought about all the stuff that lives in that dark, dark cave. An entire system of life. Life lives in the darkness. Beautiful, magnificent, gorgeous light. Stillness. Quiet. Mystery lives in the dark cave. And that day was magical. It was holy. Another holy moment in the dark occurred just a few weeks before we moved back to Missouri. We took the kids to Joshua Tree National Park. And on the last night we were there, we went out to one of the nighttime ranger talks. And as we sat underneath the vast sky, the ranger talked again about all the life that occurred in the darkness. An entire ecosystem for whom it was safer to live in the dark, in the night, in the cool stillness on the edge of the Mojave Desert. And as we were driving back to the hotel, we pulled off alongside of that dark stretch of road, and we got out, and we just looked up. And Ryan and I leaned back on the trunk of the car, and I started to cry. It was so clear. It was so beautiful. The stars, Lord have mercy, the stars. They were so bright. And I couldn't help but think of another stargazer, Galileo, who said, "I've loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night." Yes, indeed. But so many of us are afraid of the night. We are afraid of the dark, and we get so many messages from our culture that we should be. Dark is bad and scary. Be afraid. Now, I'm not naive. I have lived in a major city, and I know that there are dark places that you really should be afraid of. I know that there are people living with mental illness and depression who find themselves in dark and scary places emotionally each and every day. I know all of that. But I also know, and I also believe, as the writer of our scripture this morning explains, that God gives us treasures of darkness and riches in secret places. God creates light and darkness. The darkness is not evil on its own. And so over the next few weeks, we are going to explore some of the other stories in Scripture where God shows up in the dark, in the night, where God gives treasures and blessings and words of encouragement. And together, we are going to take a walk in the dark. Now, if you know anything about walking in the dark, if you've ever navigated the bedroom from your bed to the bathroom, is this thing ringing? Move that down. If you've ever navigated from your bed to the bathroom in the middle of the night and your nightlight is out, you know about taking a walk in the dark. It can be a little tricky. When you're walking the dog before you go to bed and it is dark, you have to pay closer attention to all the things that are going on around you. You have to slow down. You have to listen more carefully to all the sounds. There is mystery and wonder in the darkness. And sometimes with our rational, intellectual brains, we don't spend too much time in mystery or wonder. And that's why I want us to take a walk in the dark for the next few weeks. And as we enter into this season of Advent, walking in the dark can get really hard because the light is everywhere. We lit up the plaza with lights on Thursday. Some of you, including us, have lit up your houses with the lights of Christmas trees. The season can overwhelm us with light because the light keeps us busy, right? If you have a light, you can stay busy all night long if you need to. The light encourages us to go, go, go. And this is a season where we can go, go, go ourselves to death. There can be so much to do. Pressures of shopping and parties. And the light is just inescapable. And when we can't turn off the light, we miss Advent. And we shouldn't miss Advent because there's too much of Advent that we should appreciate. Advent is where true mystery and wonder do their work, in the dark and in the waiting, in the going inward to see what might be preparing itself to be born into the world. Advent is a difficult time because it's an in-between time, right? It's an already but not yet. Think about it this way. It doesn't really feel like fall anymore, right? It doesn't really feel like fall. It feels more like winter. But it's not really winter, right? Technically, officially, it is not winter. The calendar says it is not. It has not snowed. It's tried for the last several days, but it has not snowed. Therefore, it is not winter. Many people think we ought to skip winter. I was one of those people living in Southern California. I was okay skipping winter. But you know, there's a piece of me that has really missed winter these last several years. Yes, I missed winter. Some of you find that hard to believe, but I think I did. Ask me again in February, then we'll reassess. But for now, I'm saying I've missed winter. And here in Missouri, we get all 4 seasons. And that can be really important to us because each season has a spiritual gift for us. Each one has its own beauty to share with us. The seasons, if we pay attention to them, can help us navigate our spiritual lives. And winter is critical. I said earlier that I was a lover of the moon. So let me explain this with the phases of the moon. Anybody paying attention to the phases of the moon? Phases of the moon? Oh, Art Kent, I should have known. Yes. Moon. The moon is important. We can learn a lot from the phases of the moon. And the easiest way I know how to explain the spirituality and the gifts, the treasures of winter, is with the dark of the moon. Now, the dark of the moon is the exact opposite of the full moon, right? It's when you can't see the moon at all. The moon is hidden. The moon is still there. You just can't see it. And the thing about the dark of the moon, the treasure that it has to reveal to us in the darkness, is for us to think about the hidden things. The hidden things in our spiritual life that we need to illuminate. Where do we need to spend a little more time looking and exploring in the dark so we aren't afraid? What do we need to spend more time in the dark so we can see more clearly? The dark encourages us to go inward and examine our inner selves, to be quiet, to not just be afraid of the dark, but to seek the treasures that God has for us in the dark. This little book that we have for each of our kids, as Katie said, Sister Bear is afraid of the dark. And after a night of wrestling with a monster that turns out to be a coat rack in Sister's room, Papa takes Sister upstairs into the attic, where it is dark even in the middle of the day, so that she can see all the scary things that live in the attic. And as she names each one, she discovers there aren't scary monsters in the attic. There are treasures in the attic, if only she isn't afraid. What do you need to illuminate during this Advent season? What attic of your heart do you need to wander around in a bit? What monsters do you need to name and see more clearly? What treasures are in your attic that you are missing because you are too afraid to go and sit there? Now, I don't usually mix up my scriptures in my sermons, but every year on the first Sunday of Advent, I can't help but think of Gabriel visiting Mary to announce her pregnancy. And he tells her, "Do not be afraid." The same goes for Joseph when the angel comes in a different gospel and says, "Do not be afraid." We spend so much time being afraid of the dark that we miss the angel coming with a treasure from God. And I think those angels, for me at least, they tend to show up in the dark. When I'm slowed down, when I'm paying more attention, when I'm listening with all my senses, when I quit being afraid. Only then might we see the places where Emmanuel needs to be born anew. What treasure do you need to discover this Advent? What needs to be born inside of you and for you this Christmas? And how are you preparing for it? Well, I hope you'll prepare by joining me in spending a little more time in the dark. It's not hard. It gets dark before supper, for heaven's sakes. Turn off some lights. Maybe you turn off that weird artificial light on your iPhone or your iPad, or that funny green light or the blinking red light on your computer screen. Maybe it's just turning down the lights at dinner and lighting a candle. Maybe you make a simple Advent wreath and light a candle one at a time. Maybe you just sit in the dark in front of your simply lit tree. How will you spend a little time in the dark, exploring what might be born? Now, there's a quote from Barbara Brown Taylor in your bulletin this morning, and she says, "How do we develop the courage to walk in the dark if we are never asked to practice? So it is not fair for me to ask you to practice and to give you homework without first practicing here." That's what my teacher of a husband tells me. You can't send homework home without first having reviewed it in the classroom first. So we're going to review. We're going to have a little practice. Greg's going to lower the lights for us. We're going to sit for just a minute with our one candle lit. We're going to do this each and every week as we explore the darkness together. This week we lit one simple candle, the candle of hope. What does this candle represent for you during this Advent season? What are you hoping for this Christmas? This week I invite you to light a candle for hope. To hope towards Christmas. Lord knows we need more hope. And together, may we know that together we are sitting in the darkness. May the darkness be a little less scary as we light one candle for hope.